Welcome to Hack Your Happiness.
Hello, it's Mercedes, one of your co-hosts, and I'm so excited to get into this episode with Andrea Grody. Our conversation with Andrea today is so uplifting and empowering. So before we get into the episode, make sure to send this podcast to some people in your life, parents, teens, friends, or family. When you share this episode with someone, it gives them a small bit of happiness because it reminds them that you're thinking of them, and that is a fantastic connection and bonding point. This episode is filled with conversations surrounding how to deal with uncertainty and unpredictable situations, how to manage feeling overwhelmed, as well as Andrea's experience on Broadway and some very special story times that are definitely unexpected. So get comfy, send this podcast out to a couple of people in your life, and let's get into the episode. Today, we are speaking with Andrea Grody.
When I was a kid, my brother and I would make up songs as games for each other. I started college wanting to be a film composer, and I discovered that the day-to-day life of being a film composer is really solitary. I discovered I did not like that.
Andrea Grody.
Andrea Grody.
Music director and music supervisor.
The band's visit garnered 10 Tony Awards.
Best Tony Musical Tony Award winner.
Music is such an area of passion and joy, and as music is also your job, do you ever find that it might not bring you happiness in the same way as it may have in the past?
Just like any other relationship, honestly, it takes work. Sometimes people are surprised by the fact that
You are so young. In the past, did you feel like maybe you were missing out a little bit on your youth?
something I remember learning at that age. I went through a tough time in my life, and
When things get chaotic or overwhelming behind the scenes, what is your top tip for staying grounded?
as a freelancer, this often happens. Sometimes I'm in a time of life where I go, I feel really overwhelmed, and I'm going to right now. In this moment.
Welcome to Hack Your Happiness.
Welcome, Andrea.
Hi, happy to be here.
Hack Your Happiness is a podcast designed to bring you the behind the scenes of what brings iconic individuals happiness, plus their life hacks.
I'm Mercedes.
And I'm Anastasia.
Perfect. You are so talented. So take us back to the start. How did your love for music come to be, and how did you get to where you are today?
I've always been a storyteller through music. When I was a kid, my brother and I would make up songs as games for each other, and I was composing and singing at a young age, so it's always been a part of my life. I started college wanting to be a film composer, and I spent a summer in LA, and I discovered that the day-to-day life of being a film composer is really solitary. It's a lot of sitting alone in a room with computer sounds, and I discovered I did not like that. So I went back to college and had a couple months of not knowing what to do with my life, and I decided to pursue music directing for musical theater professionally. I had been doing it. I had done theater growing up, and I had been doing music directing for student productions, but I hadn't thought about doing it as a career. And when I was in college, I met Michael Friedman, who was a brilliant writer-composer, and I took a class with him my freshman year, and then my junior year, he came back with his theater company to work on a show through the university. And I was the music director of that workshop through the class. And then I became his assistant, and I pretty much followed him around for about 5 years and learned a lot about what it is to be in the industry and what it is to make a new musical. And I ended up music directing the off-Broadway premiere of that show that we had developed at school. And through working with him, I met somebody else who saw something in me and introduced me to David Yazbek when they were looking for a music director for the band's visit. And when I was 26, I got that job. And it was a very lucky break for me, and hopefully for them also. The show went to Broadway, and that sort of launched the phase of my career that I'm in right now.
That's amazing. I think it's really interesting how you started looking at something else. You wanted to do music for films, but then it ended up not kind of being what you were thinking because you tried that. And I feel like it's so important to try something that we're interested in before saying, this is what I'm going to be doing for the rest of my life. Because imagine if you had been doing that and before you really knew what you were putting yourself in for.
Yeah, I think it happens to a lot of people where you have an idea of what you want to do because some part of the product or what you see about it appeals to you. But then when you actually start doing it, you might discover what you enjoy doing is different than what the job actually entails. Or you might discover there's a job you didn't even know existed and that appeals to you more. I don't know how many people at a very young age think I want to be a music director. They might just find, I like music, I like making music, I like leading, I like working with people. And then eventually you say, oh, there's a way for me to combine all of those interests in one activity.
We just want to take a quick pause from today's interview and tell you about our happiness wellness game that Anastasia and I have designed, Mission Small Bits of Happiness.
It has 100 unique activities to do every day to find more happiness. The idea is you just have to pull out one of the cards once a day and help find out what brings you and your loved ones more happiness.
You can do it around the dinner table, in the mornings, or even keep it like on your desk. So Anastasia, pull out a card.
Spend some time in the sunlight. Open your curtains, go to your patio/deck to do schoolwork or read.
And the best part is that each card also tells you a quick line about the science behind why any given activity will make you feel happier. So the reason why sun will make us feel happier is because sunlight increases our brain's release of serotonin, a happiness neurotransmitter. And then we're gonna place this card behind Mission Accomplished as soon as we're finished. Grab your own Mission Small Bits of Happiness to support us and bring more happiness to your home. It's linked in the show notes.
Now, back to the show. Absolutely, and I find that so amazing how you're able to bring all those interests together at an intersection to do something that you absolutely love. And we've read that you did your master's degree in Scotland. And during your time there, what did you learn about happiness and living from the Scottish people?
The main thing I think anyone learns living abroad for the first time is what parts of your understanding of the world are just the way your country is rather than what the world is. In the same way that when you're a kid, you think the way that your family lives is how everyone lives, and you discover that's not true. The small thing that I remember most clearly was the walking signs at intersections. It took me a really long time to figure out how they worked, because sometimes I would be standing on one side of the road and the light would never turn green. I would have to press a button and then eventually it would turn green. And I gave up on trying to figure it out. And a few months later, I think 9 months later, honestly, I was standing there and the way it was if the cars were turning right, on a one-way street, the light would never be green unless you pressed a button to stop them. Because I said, if there's any chance the cars might go by where you're going to be, the light's not going to change. Oh, that's a really obvious and thoughtful idea. In New York City, that's not how it works. The cars go one way, the people walk the same way. If the cars are turning, there's a potential clash. It's a really simple and basic thing, but it really blew my mind when I realized it for the first time, because it makes perfect sense and I had just never thought of it that way. So there were a lot of little things like that where just going around, I said, oh, if you're starting from scratch on how do we live and what can we do to make that better for everybody, different people come to different results, and we all do our best, and some things other people figure out are better, and hopefully we can all learn from each other.
That is so fascinating. I agree. One of the things that I love about travel or watching shows from different cultures is to see that people live in such different ways from how, certain whatever country or culture that you're used to. And I think that it's important to realize that there's so many different ways to go about daily life, to go about navigating challenges, to go about spending family time even. And so I think that's one of the most interesting things about travel or living abroad, if someone has that opportunity, is realizing how much other there is out there and how much we can learn.
Absolutely.
And so you are so young and you're already very successful. I mean, you were working on Broadway when you were 26. And so in the past, did you have to work extra hard to get to where you are today? And did you feel like maybe you were missing out a little bit on your youth? Or looking back, do you wish you had slowed down?
I don't think so, honestly. I think I was very lucky to get to the level I got to. My first Broadway show was when I was 28, was when the show got to Broadway, and I had hoped to be an associate music director on Broadway by the time I was 28, and instead I was a music director, and that was amazing, and I would have worked exactly as hard no matter what, because that was the phase of life, and I was having a great time, and working that hard got me to do all the things I was doing now. But something I remember learning at that age, I went through a tough time in my life, and I imagined that early in your career, you focus on your work, and work comes first. And then you get married and settle down and have a family. And then you choose family first more often. And when I got to that point, at age 28, I didn't have a family, I wasn't married, and we had a work meeting and it got scheduled a couple days later, just out of the blue. And I had plans to go out of town and hang out with my mom. And I said, you know what, I can say I'm not available for this meeting that just got scheduled because I have plans. and they're plans for my life, and that's okay. I don't have to be a parent to say I have something that I need to do for myself that I decided on before you scheduled this meeting. I do, in fact, have my own life commitments. And that was a huge realization for me, that even as a single person, as an adult, I could make those choices for myself. And that's one of the great challenges of the freelance life, is figuring out how to balance those choices, because choices like that come up in my life all the time. And sometimes the right choice is to do the job. I came a day late to a family vacation. I changed a flight so that I could do a job. And that was the first workshop of the musical Suffs. And I have no regrets. That was the right choice. I got to the family vacation and I said, you will all be happy about this later. But it's a tricky thing to navigate. And I think I feel really lucky that I got to where I got as early as I did. And also, I have learned that when you arrive at the place you want to get to is not related to how your whole career is going to go. Lots of people just don't hit the show that's going to go to Broadway as early, but they're still doing great work. And really, what you need to do is make sure you're enjoying and investing in the work you're doing now at whatever level it is, because that's what your whole career is going to be. The moments where you go, oh my gosh, this is the greatest thing ever, will never show up if you don't see them as you're living them.
I love that. It's all about, like that mindset and making sure. And I also love how you mentioned it's kind of like that balance. Like sometimes we're going to have to push that arrival of the family vacation, which is totally fine. But other days it's like, do I really need to go to this meeting since I have something already planned, already planned on that day? I think I can miss it.
Yeah. I think it also depends, like, where you're at, because I know, like, a lot of times when you're a teen or you're just starting out, maybe it's your first job, or maybe, you're trying to get an internship, or you're trying to get on the leadership committee, even at school or something like that. It's about realizing that, like, right now I need to put in extra work, and then later I can step back, because I think sometimes we think that we're working so hard, but realizing that, like, it's the phase of life that we're kind of in. Is like, if you're just a teen and you're just starting out, you have to kind of show up, and then later, once you're further in your career, it's okay to kind of take a step back a little bit, but also realizing that, like, breaks in between are important to keep going, and, like, prioritizing yourself and your values and your family and your friends are all part of that.
Yeah, I think it's a tricky balance, particularly in teenage years and then early in a career, to know what the right amount of working hard is. And that's a cultural value as well. I think that we're at a phase right now as a country, as a society, where we're coming off of a time when people were really, like, a lot of young tech companies really valued and glorified pushing people to an unhealthy extent, where it wasn't about working really hard, it was about working to your physical limits and doing nothing else. And that's not a sustainable way for anyone to do anything. And there are some projects where I have about 2 months where I work very hard. That's the only thing I do. I get maybe a little time, but I'm really pushing myself, but I know there's an end. And at the end, I take a break, and along the way, if I have a day off, I take the day off. And sometimes I have to do a little work on the day off. Like, it's okay. It's okay to work that hard. But that's not how I'm working all the time. And I think because we are responding to that time where we push people too far, we're trying to pull back. And sometimes what happens then is people feel like anything that's hard is too hard. And you do want to challenge yourself. I love when I challenge myself. I go to a point of discomfort, because that's where you find something new, and that's where you make good stuff. Just before this today, I've been working on something that's hard for me. And it's hard in the ways that I don't like. There are some kinds of challenges I enjoy, and there are some kinds of challenges that are tricky, but I'm learning how to do something. Even at this point, I'm going to keep learning forever. And that's really satisfying, and that's partly why I took this job. And the balance between hard work and taking care of yourself is something that you learn over time, and you can do both. And how you choose to prioritize your time changes as you get older. And at the beginning, you just sort of have to try and see what works for you. And sometimes you're going to make the wrong choice in both directions. And you have to just be able to learn from it and do something different next time. But the only way you can learn is by doing it. Like, everybody, sophomore year of college is the time when I notice everybody overextends themselves a little bit, they're like, oh, I took on too much. But it's because you want to do everything, and going from high school to college often means committing to activities that take up a higher amount of time than you're used to in high school. And you realize you can't do 7 activities, you can only do 2 activities, but people say, oh, I bet I can do 5 activities and take a full class load. And then you realize, oh no, I don't like this, I can't sleep very well anymore. And then you pull back, but you have to discover what your limits are.
Absolutely, and I think that's a really great way of like describing it. Sometimes you have to take on a bit too much to kind of know where it is, but I also really...
But don't be afraid to like put up a boundary line.
Absolutely.
Like if you really feel like you're overextending yourself, like you were saying, it's okay to kind of bounce back a bit.
Absolutely, and I also love how you mentioned that, you know, you kind of have to like meet yourself halfway for both ends. Like, you shouldn't be working so hard that you're like physically unable to do anything, but at the same time not being able to like telling yourself it's okay to do a challenge that I don't really like or that I am kind of scared of, because challenges are good for us. They challenge us. That's what's in the name, and they're important even if they're not always the most fun.
Yeah, it's kind of like when you go to the gym and you want to exercise to a point that's uncomfortable, but you don't want to be hurting yourself. And sometimes you need someone watching from the outside to help you know that point, or you just get to know it by learning from yourself. But discomfort isn't bad. It's just like pain that's bad, and learning that balance in other parts of your life takes a little time and practice.
Absolutely.
I love that so much.
So today, many people say that they would rather watch TV at home than buy expensive theater tickets. How do you see TV and theater as different, and what's the importance of theater in today's world?
I have chosen to commit my life to the value of people being in the same space at the same time, breathing the same air, creating something physical together. And there is no replacing that. That's not the only way to get great art, but it is unique, and people value it. And that's why theater will always exist. Financially, as an industry in a capitalist world, there are challenges to it. There are things we can talk about, but there's nothing that's going to take us away from the fact that it's really cool to watch a person do a thing in front of you. They're breathing the same air. You can literally feel how the air moves to you, because that's what sound is. It's wiggly air just coming at you. And you see their physical presence. There's just no replacing it. So TV and film are great, and this is a great era for TV, and there's lots of cool stuff you can do, but it's a different art form, and it always will be.
I love that so much, because I think you're right. There's room for both, and they're both such different experiences. Like, yes, watching a show on your couch is great, but so is, you know, getting dressed up and going to the theater and watching a live performance, you know, really breathing that same air. And, you know, we've talked to a number of happiness experts on this podcast, and what they say is, you know, social connection is such a key to happiness. And, you know, I feel like a lot of us, since COVID, since just like remote work, and in general, a lot of things are online these days, it's easy to just kind of recoil back into living in your house and just like not leaving or not seeing people,
Absolutely.
not going out. And when you intentionally go out and watch a theater production, it's such a great way to connect.
Absolutely, and I also think that it's, like you mentioned, it's a completely different experience than watching something on TV, because when you're in like the same room, I feel like the emotions are kind of almost heightened. Like, you're able to really immerse yourself into the emotions that the characters are feeling, as well as like the music is so much more present and like fresh, and I feel like it's such a deeper experience that you're like fully immersed in.
Yeah, and you've pointed out actually maybe the most important part of it, which is that you're sharing the experience with the rest of the audience. You've all, like, if you're in the theater and you're watching something and you're all silent watching it, you're aware that everyone has chosen to come to this room, this other space that has a different energy than your house, and experience this together. And when people respond, you respond together. I mean, for anyone who's unsure about what that feels like, think about the difference between watching a movie on your couch at home and watching it with friends, and going to watch a movie with a big group of people in the movie theater. Collective experiences can't be replaced. And we are social beings.
Exactly. And I also think another aspect of theater is that, like, really human part of it. Like, yes, you could go to a movie theater and watch this beautiful, highly produced piece of art. But if you're in a theater, the music is live, there's no redos, the effects are still great, but they're limited. You can't really have CGI or things like this. Mm-hmm. And so I think that that's another part, is like that authentic peace.
Exactly. I love that.
And so music is such an area of passion and joy. And as music is also your job, do you ever find that it might not bring you happiness in the same way as it may have when you were a child or in the past?
Yeah, it takes maintenance as a professional artist to connect to the things that bring you joy as you pursue it professionally. And just like any other relationship, honestly, it takes work. Sometimes people are surprised by the fact that I don't listen to that much music casually. And it's just like, that's not my relationship to music. And I've learned that's fine, even though some people don't understand it. I make music all the time. There's music in my head all the time. And I just don't need that. And the things that I love about my work are connecting with people, teaching, recognizing patterns, helping them understand and solve problems. And music is the way that I'm able to do that. I think I would enjoy those things in other fields as well. But the thrill of making sounds, telling stories comes through in this way. And I feel very connected to that thing that I love. And if I am doing a job where the other elements of pursuing this art professionally are getting in the way, sometimes I learn from that I don't want to take that kind of job anymore. And sometimes it's just a tricky one and you have to sort of balance, well, this is true, that this is hard, and this is true, or this part I really enjoy. And you have to get used to holding all of those things. One piece of advice I like to give a lot of people considering what career they're choosing is that you choose the problems you want to have. You're going to have problems. We all are. It's just which ones really eat at your soul and which ones are just annoyances that you move through and they don't take away from the joy.
Definitely.
Yeah, that's such a good point because, I feel like there's a lot of talk of like, if you pick your passion for your job or, if you're going to try to earn money from doing what you're really passionate about, it's not going to be a passion in the same form. And while that's true, I think that when we're pursuing something that we really love and we're passionate about it, it just drives us to innovate more, to try new things, to maybe take more risks because we know that we'll love it. And if you're pursuing something you don't love as much, there's still going to be challenges and you're just not going to be as inclined as someone who is passionate about that field.
Yeah, and you have to find the joy in the process. Like when I was deciding not to become a film composer, the thing that seems so great about film composing is being in a studio, conducting an orchestra, playing your music. That, I'm sure, is amazing, and I would still love to do it. But that's maybe 1%, 0.1% of what being a film composer is. The other 99% is sitting alone in your room, like doing things on the computer. I don't like that. With musical theater, a lot of the day-to-day slog is like scheduling rehearsals, teaching to actors, figuring out what this transition is going to be. I love that stuff. And then the parts that I don't love, which are sometimes like dealing with a bunch of emails, dealing with conflicts, coming up against those challenges, I either don't mind them or I understand that they're part of what it takes for me to do the other things. But the process of going through it is what's joyful. And that's what a career is a process.
I love that. Yeah. And I liked how you mentioned that one of the really big pieces you work on is like the storyline. How do you convey the story through music? I find that so interesting because I find that in like Broadway productions, the music is so like essential to moving the story along.
I mean, that's my life's work. It's hard to say in just a couple sentences, but I mean, there's a lot of basic pieces to that. For example, a song form, like a classic song form, verse, chorus, bridge, chorus. There's a journey there. There's repetition. When you have a rhyme scheme, the words that rhyme help set up ideas, and by putting key words in key places, you can understand that they have more meaning. Putting the main idea in the chorus tells the audience what matters. Telling that story through the song so that when you get to the chorus the second time, it means something different. It's grown, the character has changed. If you're working with a choreographer, developing a dance sequence where the music is supporting it, this is something that's lifting, that's driving forward. Is it going faster? Is it getting bigger? Are you adding more instruments? There's lots of different tools to use, and we spend a lot of time studying past shows and seeing what has worked and learning from those people, and then trying something new that maybe won't work and maybe will. And that's the fun of it, is trying all the new things.
That's amazing. I love
Yeah.
that trial and error is
I
always
love-
so necessary.
I know the music is so important, and it tells you how to feel, and it tells you what's happening on like another deeper level. And like
Absolutely.
you said, a large part of your job also consists of teaching, of directing, your music director. And so I think that for everyone, there's always a first time when we're going to be stepping into a role of leadership, be it as maybe a coach or a manager or a tutor. And so as a young music director, I imagine that you might sometimes have to direct people who are more experienced in certain areas, like maybe in acting, or who are older than you. And so how do you stay confident within your role, and what is your advice to listeners to feel confident in delegating work to others?
It was very intimidating when I was young and started working with people who were much more accomplished than I was and who knew more than I was about many things. But it wasn't their job to do the thing I was doing. And there's a point early on where you might not have all the answers and you still have to be confident. And then there's a point later on where you have some of the answers and you still don't have all the answers, and it becomes easier to say, I don't know. But I think one of the key parts to being a leader is recognizing that we just need someone to make those decisions and to speak up for, okay, we're going to try it this way. And if that's your job, you don't have to have the answers, but you can speak up and say, let's try this. How does this work for you? Like, especially if you're leading a group of people who are all making something together, which is, I think, most of us. See, what we're working toward together. You try something, see if it works for everybody, ask what they think. You're there to support other people when they're also working. So checking in with them and then being the one to say, okay, let's do that. Moving the process forward, getting toward action, making a decision. And the best leaders, even if they don't have all the answers, are comfortable saying, I don't know, and are comfortable recognizing that role in the room of seeing where we are and saying, okay, let's do it this way. We're going to proceed in this fashion. And over time, you learn all the skills that support that so you know which choices to make. But that's really what it is to be a leader, is knowing how to help move the process forward, knowing that no matter how old you are, you can assume that role by understanding what the steps are and helping corral the group into saying, let's go here now. And by knowing that in any position, the people around you are just as valuable, if not more so than you are. Everyone in that room has chosen to be there. So you want to be grateful to them and you want to recognize what they have to bring and see how they can contribute and see what they need.
That's fantastic advice. Thank you. And what I love so much about what you've said is really realizing the value that both other people bring, and also I think it's important to recognize the value that we bring. And I think sometimes, even if you're young or you're not super experienced in a certain area, realizing that like my perspective is important too. Maybe I have a better perspective as like, the younger generation. Maybe I have the better perspective from like an audience member because I'm not as experienced in this field, or I have a different background. I can kind of pull on that. And so I think realizing that like no matter what, there's a place for you, and you just have to sometimes spin that to your advantage and be confident within that.
Yeah, the best leaders know that we're all collaborating together. So you have something to bring, and if you can feel secure in that you have something to bring, then you can welcome what other people have to bring. And that's what leads to the best work, is when everyone can feel comfortable enough to take a chance and also to listen to everybody else and include their ideas.
I love that. And I feel like that also I feel like a lot of the times people think being a leader and it can kind of feel scary, but like the way you described it makes it feel like something that doesn't have to be scary. You don't have to know everything. It's also about being in the position of being confident enough in yourself to be able to say, I don't know, we should find out.
And I think that same thing goes for being a good teammate, whether, you're on a sports
Definitely.
team, you're working on a production, you're, in a club, no matter what, even in like working a job, like bringing your own perspective and not being afraid to say what you think and collaborate and know that you're improving the environment is also essential.
Absolutely.
And I know that this is a question that me and Mercedes are both very interested in, and I'm sure many of our listeners are as well. But can you take us behind the scenes on one of your nights in Broadway?
Sure. So let's say it's a regular night, we have one show, and we're going to perform the show. The actors are called at half hour, which means half an hour before the show is supposed to start, the actors have to be in the building. Lots of people arrive before, and I often arrive before half hour because if I have any notes I want to talk to the actors about, if I want to go around and say hello to everybody, the best time for me to do that is before half hour, because then people start their processes of getting ready, and I don't want to interrupt them. So I arrive usually 45 minutes or so before the show is supposed to start. I'll say hello to the stage manager, hello to the actors. You want to just greet people, like, especially once you start running a show. You don't always see people outside of the actual performance, so you want to take some time to say hello and invest in the community. And then I'll spend a little bit of time with the band as well, saying hello to them, just investing in those social aspects of all of us working together. And then I get changed. I have to wear, usually if I'm conducting, I'm wearing black clothing, so I'll put on whatever I wear. A couple minutes before the show starts, I'll get to my station. If I'm playing a hard book, then I'll usually get there a little bit before so I can warm up at the piano and be ready on any hard passages. If it's not as hard of a show, I can get there just a few minutes before and make sure all my equipment is working. And then we'll tune, we'll check in with everybody, I'll make sure the musicians are ready to go. I have a little phone where I'll talk to stage management, and they'll ask if I'm ready, I'll say yes, and then they'll give me a cue and the show starts. And then we have a sequence of running the show. We've practiced it many times. We do the show. As it's happening, if I hear something that sounds a little bit different, a little off, I want to check in with somebody, I'll take a note. And during a show, I often take notes by putting like a sticky note on my score. And then when I have a break, either during the performance or at intermission, I will write those down on a notepad so I can talk to someone about it later. And then I can talk to them about it before the show the next day. And then we have intermission. We go to the bathroom. We get a little time to chat. We go back. We do act 2. And then at the end of the night, we check in. Sometimes something weird happens during the day and we got to talk about it. Like some audience member does a funny thing or some moment just kind of felt funny and someone says, what happened there? And then we talk about it. But once the show ends, we're pretty much ready to go. So unless there's something you have to talk about, you can sort of work on your exit. I'll go change back into my regular clothes. If I have any friends who are at the show, I'll get them at the stage door. I'll say hi. I'll often just say hi to stage management on the way out. And then I go home.
Oh my goodness,
That's
thank
so
you.
amazing.
I recently went to a little play with my mom here, and I think it's so interesting, like all that stuff that goes on before, after, and behind the scenes at intermission. And so thank you for kind of taking us behind the scenes, because I think it's something that we all wonder. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Awesome. And so another question that Anastasia and I have always wondered is if you could share an unexpected or kind of crazy story time from your time working on Broadway.
Oh boy. There's always something interesting happening. The last show I did had an interesting quirk, which was that Hillary Clinton was one of our producers, and CBS, right? CBS Good Morning America, no, 60 Minutes, I think. 60 Minutes was doing a segment on the fact that Hillary was the producer of this musical. So an unusual part of my first rehearsal process was that CBS was coming to film it because Secretary Clinton was coming to our meet and greet on the first day of rehearsal, and she was going to sit in and watch the first part of rehearsal, which is usually a music rehearsal. So we get there, we're doing our meet and greet, we got a lot of people in the room, we're saying hello. It's always a little bit of a presentation because you've got a lot of people there. Suddenly, a big microphone swoops in while our composer was talking because they're filming for television, and then we're getting ready for the first rehearsal. We haven't been in the room together in a long time. I'm going to sort of get everybody's mind back into the details of the show, and someone comes over to me saying, hey, I'm from CBS, I heard you're going to be doing a lot of talking. And I said, yes. And they said, we'd like to put a microphone on you. And I said, oh, this is not what I expected. So I get a little microphone going through my outfit, and I know I'm being watched and recorded during the rehearsal. And I had to just focus on trying to get the information to the actors as well as possible because it was a working rehearsal. And that was a fun and unusual experience. And luckily, I picked a song. I knew this was going to happen. So I picked a song that people were familiar with, that we could come back to at another time when people were maybe a little bit more in the process than they were while everyone was watching them. But that was a pretty wild experience.
That is so cool. I know it can definitely be very difficult when it's like you're trying to do what you're supposed to be doing, but then it's like that like feeling of like being
something else is happening.
And, like, you have no idea
I
what's
had
going
no
on.
idea that Hillary Clinton produced like a production.
That's so cool.
So fascinating.
It was very special having her involved. She came to that rehearsal that I led, and she also came to the Sitzprobe, which is the first rehearsal where the orchestra and the singers come together. It's the best rehearsal, everyone agrees. So she got to see me work a lot, and that was really exciting.
Oh my
That's
gosh.
so cool.
Yeah, that's so awesome. Wow.
Absolutely. And so, based on what we've read a lot about putting the process together of a musical, it requires a lot of patience. And teens, while perhaps not in the process as lengthy, can also struggle to stay focused and committed to the process or a task at hand. And it's easy to get overwhelmed, be it with studying, learning something new, training for a marathon, or anything in between. what's your advice for staying diligent and focused throughout this kind of lengthy process?
One step at a time. One step at a time. That's all you can do. You can only do one thing at a time. So if you say to yourself, I'm writing a musical today, that feels very overwhelming. But if you say, today I'm going to try and figure out how the second verse of this song goes, then just do that. Just start there. You can only get there by doing each little chunk one at a time, and it might feel like too many chunks, but I promise someone has done something bigger before. They had to dig the Panama Canal by hand, one scoop at a time. And I don't actually know if they did all of it by hand, but a lot of it they actually did do by hand. And it took many years, and then eventually they got there. Every book you've ever written is written one word at a time. So you just have to break it down into chunks. And if the chunk you're doing right now feels too big, make it a little smaller. And then make sure that when you're doing that work, you're giving yourself time to do it and you're not distracting yourself with other things. That's the hardest thing about doing anything by yourself. And if you need help, then get someone and talk to them and work through it.
I love that because you know what, Anastasia and I do the same exact thing with all of our different happiness products that we've designed, or even like I built our website from scratch, and I've always kind of broken it down into little chunks of like, okay, one website page per day, or we have like an activity box with 100 activities, so like 5 activity cards today, and you know, building an entire website in a day or a month seems like a crazy amount of work, but when you're doing a page a day, by the end of the month you've got a full working site, and you also maintain a higher degree of quality throughout whatever project you're pursuing. And so I think that's some fantastic advice. Exactly.
Absolutely. And it's so easy to get like your head so like caught up in it, and then while you're supposed to be doing the work, instead of actually doing it, you're thinking about everything you need to do, and it's like you're like spiraling, and it's like, this is not helpful. I'm not actually even doing the work I was wanting to do.
That's right. There are a lot of lifestyle hacks and time-saving tools and schedules that people like to use, and at some point I found myself being really overwhelmed by them, and my bullet journal's over there. I use a bullet journal, and what I love about the bullet journal, there's lots of ways to organize, but I really just use it as a dot is a task and a dash is a piece of information. And if I have to do something, I write it down and I put a dot next to it. And then when it's done, I draw an X. It's done. And then everything is simpler. Do I have to do something? It's a dot. And then what I'm going to do now is do that. I'm not going to try to organize it any further. I just have to do that. And that's often the hardest part, is just saying, oh no, I have to actually just do it now.
Sometimes we really do overthink like getting to the doing rather than we could have been done it by now. Exactly.
That's right.
And so if sometimes I think Broadway, I'm sure, can get overwhelming, and life in general for teens, adults, everyone can get chaotic or overwhelming. But for you, when things get chaotic or overwhelming behind the scenes, what is your top tip for staying grounded?
When I feel overwhelmed, I take time, and I take maybe not that much time. I don't know how much I have, but I take a second to say, what is overwhelming me and what can I do to address that? Even just today, I was recognizing that I was feeling stressed about my schedule. And as a freelancer, this often happens. And I realized that I had a few too many things going on. And there was one thing, I wanted to do everything. And I didn't actually have time right now to do all of it. And one of the hardest things as a freelancer is recognizing that I want to do more than I have time for and knowing what I have to say no to. And I said, this is the most important thing right now. And I'm going to say no to this other stuff. And by saying no to those things, I made space for this other thing. And then I felt calmer. And it took a second for me to stop and think about what was going on, to understand how I could make that choice. And sometimes I'm in a time of life where I go, I feel really overwhelmed, and I'm going to right now. This is a busy time. And I can only go one step at a time. I can only do my best, but I'm going to recognize that this is what I'm doing right now and that there will be an end. And in this moment, which might just be an hour, it might be a day, whatever it is, I know what I'm doing, and I'm just going to go forward and do what I can, and that's going to be the best I can do. And hopefully, when you're in a moment of feeling overwhelmed, you can get to a point where you've understood what's going on quickly, and it might not feel less overwhelming for a little bit, but you'll get there.
Definitely. And I know me and Mercedes can really relate to this. We just came out of final season, and it's very brutal.
Yes.
But kind of once you kind of acknowledge that, and I think I love that, just acknowledging the fact that you're going to be overwhelmed is really important. And then I feel like after that, you're able to function a lot better, because it's like, I know what I'm in for. I know I'm going to be overwhelmed, but I'm going to do my best to kind of manage it.
And it's not forever. I'm not going to be overwhelmed for the next 15 years.
Exactly.
Maybe for a week, maybe for a month, but yeah.
Yeah, like if I'm doing a Broadway show, it's a production of a new musical, we're going into tech, we're going into previews, I'm going to feel really overwhelmed. I'm going to be pushed to my limit. There is no way about that. So I know I'm not going to be cooking very much. I'm not going to maybe do my laundry as well. So maybe I'll like get a delivery service because at this time I just don't have time for it. I discover the things I think I usually have to do and I say it's either not going to happen or I have to find another way for it to get done. And then once the show opens and then things calm down, then I have some daytimes, then I go, okay, now I'm going to do all that laundry. So it's just knowing what the limit is. And it's okay when sometimes you're really just focused on that one intense thing.
I recently came back from a trip with my dad and I brought my Manta sleep mask with me. And I have to tell you, this sleep mask was game changing.
Plus, I lent my Manta sleep mask to my dad so he could sleep on the plane, and oh my gosh, Anastasia, you tell them.
Oh yes, I slept so well. My dad said that he woke up, he had no idea where he was because these are 100% blackout, so you won't see any lighting. They help you sleep longer and deeper. The silk one is super silky and amazing. My dad used Mercedes' sound eye mask that can play sounds to help you sleep.
I mean, what don't they have? And best of all, these gifts are fantastic for college going away gifts. I know right now it's a season of change in a lot of our lives, so if you're looking for a great gift to get yourself or a teen in your life, the Manta sleep mask is a thoughtful gift that brings us a small bit of happiness because, I mean, sleep is linked to more happiness and wellness. So you can shop now using the link in our show notes.
So let's get back to the episode.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think sometimes it's even like realizing like what is a must do. And I know this is something that I love to put into practice. It's like, okay, tomorrow is my test. I must study for this. But do I really need to finish, my project that's due a week from now? No, I can finish that later. Or my, speech is tomorrow. I need to review my notes. But, I can respond to this email in an hour or two because then that speech will be over with. And so I think it's realizing that like not everything has to be done all at once. Just do what has to be done when you're feeling overwhelmed.
For sure. Music has such incredible power to hold emotion that words can't. So what's a moment in your career when music really captured the way you feel?
I've had so many moments like that. When I hear like a big group of people singing like a big open chord, it makes me cry, and I don't even know why. Like if I go to high holiday services, I'm Jewish, and I'll go to like Rosh Hashanah services, and I hear the choir singing, I cry every year. I don't know why. I just like there's something about the quality of the sound, and I can't even put words to it. And that's my favorite kind of thing. Like it's touching on something that I can't explain, and I don't need to. I can just have this feeling, and isn't it beautiful that I can be so moved? I guess that's my best example is just going to services and like maybe it has to do with I like being part of a community and showing up once a year for this thing that people have done for millennia and like the quality of acoustic sound. Like a lot of musical theater is a very like forward belted sound and those sounds are a little bit more choral where you just like touch on a different kind of resonance and it's just beautiful.
I love that. That's so amazing. And I think that there is something so powerful in like community and having that kind of
and the way
sound
that
and all
music
together.
like brings you together in that way.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it also like connects you to the past, which I think is genuinely so amazing.
So cool. Yes. And so to any teen aspiring to someday work in theater, what is the first step that they should take in starting out?
If you're interested in working in theater, this sounds so silly, but find theater makers around you and do stuff with them and try whatever you're interested in. At the beginning, you should explore anything you want to explore. That's the best way to discover what you like, is just to make a big mess and then see what happens. And don't be afraid of what you want, and don't be afraid of trying all of it. The way I usually describe this is we grow like trees, we grow toward our light. So if you're interested in something and you haven't done it before, or you have done it before and that's what you want to do that. If that's your light, if that's what's drawing you, grow like a tree. And then over time you'll say, oh, I can't do all of this to the extent I want to. And you'll learn how to prune. You'll say, oh, I really want to focus on this right now. And maybe in 2 months you're going to do a totally different thing. Great. You can make a career like that, where you spend some time doing one thing and then you change later. But at the beginning, you just got to explore and practice if you are a singer, if you are a dancer, if you are a pianist, if you're an instrumentalist, anything that requires skills, the best thing you can do when you're young is use that practice time and build those skills, because when you're an adult, you have less time to practice just 10 minutes a day, an hour a day of just getting this scale down, and I want to be able to play it with the metronome nice and evenly, and those skills stay with you forever, and you just have to put in the time for them. So now is the best time to do that.
I love that. Also, viewing it as kind of it's better to start with an array of things that you're interested in, and then kind of narrowing it down. Like the example you used earlier of the going to university, and then you're in all these clubs, but then you realize that I feel just it's better to have more than less, because then once you kind of figure out what you like or not as much, then you're able to grow towards the light that you love.
That's such a beautiful metaphor. Really.
I love it so much.
Thank you.
And so what's something that you used to chase that now you've sort of let go of?
I'm going to think about this for 1 second. I used to think that everybody was some level of perfect that I thought I also had to be. And when I was first trying to do what I do now, I spent a lot of time saying, what's my weakest link? What's the weakest thing I have? How can I get that better? And I invested in a lot of skills. And I eventually hit a point where my weakest link was a thing I didn't need to have to do what I do, or it was a thing that I could have, but I knew I didn't want to put in the work to have it at that extent. And now I have those limits, and I say, if you want to hire a jazz improviser on the piano, you shouldn't hire me. I'm not the right person for that. I wish I had those skills, and I just don't. And I have let go of trying to have all of those things. And I know the things that I excel at, and I invest in them, and I keep learning new things. But you can't have everything. And I've also let go of the idea that there is a best. I think we often think that there's a pyramid where at the top it's a small number or just one, and then it gets lower and lower. And there are lots of people who do what I do at an extremely high level. And I'm very good at it. I know I'm very good at it. I'm proud of my skills. And I know that if I were up for a job and someone said, we don't want you, who else is good? I could recommend at least 5 people who I think would be awesome very quickly, because there's room for all of us. And I know that I have something unique to bring that sometimes I can describe and sometimes I can't. And it's okay that other people are also this good, because we're all a little unique. And sometimes there's just only one of us, or only so many of us, and there are so many projects, so we all get to spread out the work. So I think I've let go of the idea that there is a best. There's just a level of excellence that I want to maintain and keep growing into. And then I want to keep getting work, and also I want to support my colleagues who do great work as well.
That is so beautiful, and I really think that that's something we all need to tap into, because I think there's so much, it's, of course, self-growth is important, but also nobody is perfect, nobody's great at everything, and sometimes when we're trying to be great at everything, we're not really good at anything, because we're putting our feet into so many different pools and we're trying everything, and then you realize that you're not actually following what you're interested in, or really putting a lot of effort into what you're interested in, because you're trying to be good at everything, and it's a lot to balance and to hold. And for Anastasia and I, we've never been that good at sports, we've never been good at the common, high school extracurricular activities, but we've become really good at our business and public speaking and podcasting, and tapping into that strength and investing more time in that has been far more rewarding than trying to be good at soccer when we'll never be that good because we're not that interested in it. And so I think that's such a powerful message. So thank you. Yeah.
You're welcome.
And something that we love to ask in our final few questions here is, first of all, what's one piece of advice you wish you could give to your teenage self?
Put in the work. Trust that you're doing the right things, and it's gonna lead you to something great, and you can't know what it's gonna be in advance. Whatever you imagine a career is going to look like, it's not gonna be that, because when you're an adult, you live through it the same way you do when you're younger. I think I always sort of imagine I graduated from college, I make my choice, and then I do that forever. And that's not what it's like. I'm still me. I'm still living through every day. And then my feelings change and evolve, and what I want to do changes. And that's actually what my life and career is like. So you just have to stay with yourself in the moment. You have to get comfortable with that uncertainty. And I think I would want my younger self to know that she's doing the right thing, and take a chance. dive at opportunities. That's a good one too. Like the reason I started working with Michael Friedman, who really changed my life and gave me a career, was because I said, do you want an assistant? I just took the chance to ask. And if I'd never said anything, I don't know if I would be doing this. I'm so glad I had that idea. So don't be afraid to ask, because the worst someone can say is no. And the best situation is it changes your life.
That's amazing. You really just sometimes have to say, why not? Why don't I just ask? There's no harm in just seeing where this could potentially go.
And so what do you do every day that brings you a small bit of happiness?
I look at my plants, which are growing. It's June. It's pretty early in the year, so they have new leaves, and it makes me so happy to see them thriving. I love my little bit of nature in the city. I wish I had a little more of it, but I'll get it someday, I'm sure.
Oh, I love
That's
that.
amazing.
It's the small good things in every day,
Absolutely.
and I love that. It's just a little burst of color.
Absolutely. So do you have a motivational that you love and remember?
Motivational quote.
Yes.
I came up with this, I think, myself when I was about 13, and I feel very silly quoting myself, but I really don't know how I came up with it, and I think it was very wise advice, so I want to thank my earlier self. And what I said was, love everything that comes by, but do your best to surround yourself with things you can love without effort.
Oh my
I
gosh,
love
you
that.
were
At
13?
13? That's
I don't know how I came up with that. I had some day where I was struggling with something, and I made a list of things I wanted to do, and most of them were very quotidian things. And at the end, I had that, and I was like, where did this come from?
That's amazing, because that's so true.
Absolutely.
If you love something without effort, it's natural and it's meant to be, kind of.
Yeah, and you can love things that are effortful. Not everything in life is effortless. In fact, almost nothing is effortless. All of the best things take work, including love. So look for the things that feel most natural and comfortable to you, and you can still find joy and love in everything.
I love that.
Definitely.
That's beautiful. Thank you. And so, if our audience wants to keep up and learn more, where's the best place for them to find you?
I'm on Instagram at Andrea Grody. I don't update it that much, but if something big is going on, you'll see something. I'm pretty easy to find on the internet. You can Google me. I'm the only Andrea Grody out there. So check out what's going on with my new shows. The Suffs tour is launching in Seattle this September. You can catch it all across the country for the next year. Come check it out. We're also going to be on PBS next July from great performances. So if you can't see it in person, you'll be able to see it on film. My website, andreagrody.com, has usually some sense of my latest news. And you can listen to the cast albums of many shows that I've worked on. The Band's Visit, Tootsie, Suffs. I've done a couple albums with the Michael Friedman Project, preserving his work.
That's amazing.
Yes, well, thank you so much. This was so inspiring, and thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It was wonderful to meet you.
Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode of Hack Your Happiness, and thank you so much to Andrea for joining us today.
What an uplifting conversation. What was your biggest takeaway, Anastasia?
I think my biggest takeaway is that you sometimes have to balance your life out. You're gonna have different seasons, you're gonna have different moments where you have to work harder and focus more on the work in front of you, and then it's okay to also take breaks and have a bit of lighter times. How about you?
I love that, and one of my biggest takeaways from Andrea today was the importance of taking things one step at a time. That's the only way to kind of eat your way through all your big goals, is one bite at a time. Every book was written one word at a time. I think that's such a powerful reminder that even the biggest projects, ultimately you can break down to one step at a time and not get overwhelmed by.
Absolutely.
If you enjoyed this episode of Hack Your Happiness, we think you would love our interview with composer Laura Karpman. She is an Oscar-nominated composer and shares all about her journey, hacks for overcoming obstacles, as well as how we can be more perseverant.
And that when you have a wall, when you come up against a wall, you don't try to break it down, you just kind of walk around it. Because if you can walk around it, then you can see what's on the other side. But if you try to break it down, all that brute force sometimes won't yield anything.
You can listen to Laura's interview now. It's in the show notes.
If you enjoyed this week's episode of Hack Your Happiness, please leave us a 5-star review and to follow us so that you don't miss any episode. See you next time!